Welcome, everybody. Welcome to today's Hess World podcast. And I'm delighted today to be in conversation with Anuj Marwaha. We all know him as Anuj, and it's one of those sort of like Pele. And, you know, most people don't know what Anuj's surname is. We know him as Anuj. But in my 40 odd years, Anuj is up there with one of the best sellers in the IT industry I've ever worked with. And I don't say that lightly. I've worked with some really strong sellers. I've been delighted I've spent my career predominantly in a sales function. There are not many outstanding ones out there, but Anuj is definitely one of them. And so I'm keen today to understand what's driven Anuj, what's made him the successful seller that he is and still is, and not just as a one-off. He didn't just score 25 goals one season. He scores 25 goals every season. If you get the analogy, consistently outstanding. I wanted to talk to Anuj and understand what the secret sauce was of his success. So welcome, Anuj. Thank you for joining us today, because I know you're still very very out there winning deals and looking after clients. I thought it would be an interesting place to start, is because you obviously come from an ethnic Indian background. Tell us a little bit about the family background before we start launching into the career.
Yeah, sure. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for that intro. That's very flattering, and I'm not sure I agree with you, but hey, I'll take it as a really nice compliment.
Should we end it now then, if you don't agree?
Well, no, there's some great people out there, right? And everyone's great in their own way. And I just try and do a good job in terms of what's been asked of me. So just going back, I'm what would we call it now? First generation?
Did mum and dad come over from India?
Yeah, my dad actually came here in the early 60s. Right. 18 years old he was. It's quite a funny story about that, actually. He was 18 years old. He always tells me he came here when he was 18 years old with £1. And maybe in the 60s, that was probably the equivalent, I don't know, of a tenner, 20 quid. But yeah, he had to also, one of the other things was he was one of around 14 kids. He was the second youngest. So, and he came from northern India, an area of India called the Punjab. Yeah. And they didn't come from a necessarily well-off family. So he had a lot of ambition. And, back in those days, there was, it was coming to the UK was like a dream. You can become really successful. And he always had a dream. I mean, coming at that young age, leaving your family and coming and trying to fend for yourself is, I think, it's one of the most amazing things. And
back in the early 60s, there wouldn't have been a huge ethnic Indian community either.
No, I don't think it was. It was still very... nowhere near the level it is today, right? And so it was quite a unique thing. There was a few people in those days, but he always is proud of saying he was one of the first, and he helped a lot of people, like family and friends and other people, come over and sort of try and make a life for themselves. The funny thing I was going to say was, I don't know if I'll get him in trouble here, but was a lot of the jobs back then, you had to be over 21. And because he was only 18, his passport actually lied. It said he was 3 years older than he is, which is now quite a discussion, because we all say he's 3 years older than he is, and he claims he isn't. And we say, well, look at your passport. It says you're 3 years older than you are. But yeah, there was a reason for it. It was to get accommodation, to get certain types of jobs. That's what he was advised to do. He's got very close siblings, one older, one younger, and they all seem to be born in the same year.
What was it like growing up in this country, school and what have you? And when did you decide you wanted to go into what was called IT then, but we call tech these days.
God. So I was never the most academic at school.
Right.
But coming from an Asian background and an Asian family, it was all about, your choices. You have to go to school. You have to get the best grades. Anything below A's is not good enough. And then A levels as well. And then you need to go to university. And ideally, you need to be a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer. Yeah, they're your kind of choices or what's drilled into you as you're growing up. And I was, of course, none of those things because I was just not interested for starters. And academically, at the school time, I was probably more interested in messing about and bunking off and going out with my mates and things like that. But I was forced to complete all of that pretty much. There was no other option. And while I was at university, that was my first opportunity to go and have a bit of freedom. So get away from home. I wanted to go as far away as I could.
Where did you go?
I ended up in Manchester University, and I did an IT degree. Again, it wasn't because I was particularly interested in IT and business. It was because that's a place I could get a spot.
So it was more going to university, getting away, and Manchester seemed a good place to go.
Yeah. And, yes, it had technology, and I've always been into sort of tech and sci-fi and things like that. So it was like, all right, we'll give this a go, This might be all right. But it was all about going away, getting away from home and
interesting,
living on your own and student digs and having that experience. But part of that, so the real game changer for me was part of the university degree I did had a 1-year industrial placement. And so while I was sort of just getting on with it and going and just getting by really, that 1 year I worked for a tech company who was called AT&T at the time.
Yeah.
And they were flipping names between AT&T and NCR. You heard of NCR?
What, as in National Cash Registers?
Yes, you have.
Yeah, earlier in my career, I sold ATMs. In fact, I ran the ATM business for IBM. So, and NCR were our main competitors, making those ATMs up in Dundee.
The NCR was, 90%
Do you know
of the
what
global
the key technical differentiation with NCR and what I was selling, which were deep old ABMs, is you either picked the note out of the dispenser or you sucked it. So we used to say to customers, well, what do you prefer, sucking or blowing? And some people took that the wrong way.
Brilliant.
Anyway, yes. So sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were in AT&T, NCR.
I learned. It was my first sort of exposure to, let's say, a big corporate and a tech company, because they are a tech company ultimately. I found out a few things.
They're good sales guys. They're the good sales training, if I remember NCR.
Well, these guys invented the Unix platform. So the first ever version of Unix was from NCR, and also. What I heard there was it was the first place that ever come up with the term "you're fired."
Okay.
So it's one of the oldest companies in the world.
They go way back.
They go way back, and the story was that if the boss wanted to get rid of anyone, the CEO at the time, everybody works at their desks, he would come to their desk, put everything, all of their belongings in a box. Put it in the middle of a courtyard, because I don't even know if it was a car park back in those days, and set it alight. And that's where the term "you're fired" came from. Did you know that?
I must admit, I've never adopted that approach to firing people, but anyway.
So while I worked there, I was really, this was a real turning point. And while I worked there, I got exposed to two different areas. One area was the technical side of it. So how do you put together, the solutions and the technology and the hardware that they sell? And the other side, so I spent 3 days in Birmingham in a place called Sheldon. Oh, right. Terrible.
Apologies to all our listeners out there who hail from
But saying that, I have family there.
Sheldon.
I tell you what, Sheldon in the Midlands and my time in Birmingham, that I spent 3 days a week working there.
Yeah.
Then 2 days a week at their headquarters in Marylebone Road.
Which is still
next door to the
In
Landmark.
fact, I don't think it's there anymore. But
No,
it was
it's shut down recently.
fantastic
It's an
location.
amazing place. And you know, being one of the grads, or not even a grad yet, being on industrial placement there, you know, we got exposed to various people, and then at one stage we had a sales guy. He was an account manager who came in and did a bit of a chat about what they do, you know, just for our learning, and you know, there was a couple of them, and back then it was probably late 90s, you know. They had these really smart suits on. They looked really cool, you know. They were really well done up, tanned, and I was just looking at these guys and I was in awe of them. I was like, wow, these are really cool guys, man. They go out and they're talking about these big deals they do and everything else. And kind of in my mind, that was the first time where I thought, I wouldn't mind doing what they do, you know. How do I go about being one of those? But you know that, you know, overall that year,
because you went into a technical role, didn't you?
Sorry. Yes,
Sorry,
I did.
I interrupted you, Anu. So
no, absolutely. No, you're right. This is where we're. You know, it was a real game changer for me. I went back. I completed my final year at university, and I was actually started understanding, because it was, you know, IT and computer science and a lot about tech and the social element of what impact technology is going to have on us, on humans, right, moving forward, and how things are going to change moving forward. So I really got into it, and I ended up doing quite well at the end of university, even though I used to mess about all the way through.
Or did you get a first or something like that?
I did, yes.
Oh, there you go.
Oh.
Here's a man
you can cut that bit out.
No, here's a man who says he wasn't that academic, but you got a
No,
first.
I really wasn't. But straight after that, because of that work experience, again, you know, I recommend any youngsters out there who are thinking of getting into tech or thinking of doing any career through university, one of the biggest things is having that work experience behind you.
Yeah.
Because that absolutely changed everything for me. And straight afterwards, I had a number of offers on tech companies that I applied for because I wanted to get into that. And I ended up doing my first job as a pre-sales / engineer at a company called Morse, who was a Unix specialist.
Morse.
Yeah.
I mean, we all remember
Great
Morse.
company.
Yeah, it was a great company.
Yeah.
Yeah, did very well on the back of Sun, didn't it?
Sun Microsystems, yeah.
if
They
I
were a
remember.
printer shop in Holborn, and they started selling these Sun workstations as well as printers to all the banks, and then it just exploded from there.
Yeah.
I mean, at their peak, they were about 700 million turnover, and this is, you know, they were way ahead of any other company specializing in HP, Sun Microsystems, and IBM. So I was there. I spent my first 6-7 years there as a technical pre-sales, as a technical consultant. But just to answer your question, the reason, you know, I always thought, and I generally think that if you're gonna, the sales was always where I wanted to end up. You know, account management, sales, selling solutions, that sort of thing. But I always had it in my mind that, you know, if I buy something from someone, whether it's going and getting a laptop in Curry's or going and buying a car or whatever it might be, you always come across people that you talk to, that give you some tips and give you the right advice, and they know their stuff. If you're buying something off someone and they really know their stuff and they can give you some good advice, that's for me, that's quite important. Yeah. So I went into the whole technical space because I thought if I'm going to eventually end up trying to sell solutions to customers, I need to have a grounding. I need a technical sort of background so I can at least have a conversation instead of what typically happens is bringing 5 pre-sales people to a meeting.
That, I think, has stood you in very good stead. And it's amazing. People outside the tech industry would say, well, that's obvious, isn't it? But it's amazing. A lot of people in sales roles didn't have that technical grounding.
You know, one of the most common things that came up early on while I was pre-sales and attending meetings with account managers was the first thing, and there's a number of them. First thing they'd say is, I don't know anything about tech all we come here to talk to you about, speak to him.
Yeah.
And I just thought, mate, come on.
You don't bring a builder in or an architect in or a doctor in and say, I don't know anything about medicine, but I don't know anything about building this house or building this extension, but
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm with you. When I joined ICL as a grad trainee, and then I went through it again with IBM a couple of years later. I did COBOL programming. I actually had to learn hexadecimal, believe it or not. I mean, it taught me that a technical career wasn't for me, but you knew the basics, didn't you? You actually understood. There was a grounding. I've always felt that with you, that technical sort of hinterland you've got has always been there and helped you.
Yeah, I think it has. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say I was absolutely the best technical whiz and knew everything, but I did the role for almost a decade to start.
So
off
you
with.
went in, and then so when did you go into sales?
I think the reason I did the technical side for a long time is I didn't even know something called pre-sales or a sales engineer existed, and I quite enjoyed that because I started off I spent a lot of times in data centers configuring stuff and working till early hours of the morning with loud noises and freezing cold. But the pre-sale side was quite nice. That's where you go and see clients and you start talking about solutions and you put proposals together and help with the justification. So I did that for a long time. At that point, I started sort of crossing over in terms of sometimes you're doing a lot, including the commercial side of things in pre-sales, for the account managers out there. Yeah. You all know who you are out there. You all know where everything is pretty much done for you.
You must have got to the point when you're thinking, I'm making the money for you. I want to make some money for myself.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. But also, nowadays it's very different. There's if you work for any large vendor, even as a technical pre-sales or a sales engineer, you're kind of buddied up with an account manager, and they get bonuses. The pre-sales element gets bonuses as well or remuneration, if you like to call it, commission.
I've always found that as really powerful combo, actually.
Yeah.
Over the years.
My first job in the city was for a company called BSG, Business Systems Group. And,
after you left Morse?
After I left Morse. And one of the big drivers for me going there was the CEO there at the time. Great guy. Learned loads off him. A chap called Nick Gerard.
Nick Gerard.
He was...
I hope you're listening, Nick.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. I learnt so much of him. But, when I sat down and had a chat with him, interview... he said, you know what, Anuj, the days of salespeople making all the money and pre-sales not making anything have gone. That's how he told it to me. It was like, whatever you do, we'll give you a bonus on any projects you're involved in and things like that. I thought, wow, man, that's it's a bit scary going into sales. There's always this stigma around having a target. And if you don't hit your target, it is black and white. If you do, in sales, but this pre-sales area was kind of an in-between. So I think I'm really fortunate to have that as well, where I got a taste of, I had a nice integration or migration, if you like, transition.
So a commission-based pre-sales role. Okay.
Yeah. So I did that for a while, which was really good. But it got to a point where the next place I went, I've only worked at 4 places throughout my career, right? 25 plus years. The next place I went to, where I was, again, they said pre-sales, but they'll offer you even more of a bonus if you move there. It was 6 months or 8 months.
Where was this place?
That was a company called Kavanagh.
Okay.
Small reseller, got acquired by SCC back in 2010. So I was there from around 2006 till 2010. Spent 4 years there. Again, great little firm. I quite like the smaller firms. They're very agile.
Yeah.
They can turn on a sixpence, and you can just get stuff done. But it was there where I think 6 or 8 months into that role, the CEO said, I think you're wasting time, Anuj. You need to go full on into sales. I think the real reason was because, I was allowed to manage my own clients there as well as do pre-sales for and work with some of the other account managers. I think maybe I would have got paid too much, or might be an issue there. So he kind of pushed me, and I think it was the right thing to do at the time as well.
So how old were you when you had your first proper sales job?
I was around 28, 29 when I started managing clients on my own.
And then when Kavanagh, how old were you when it was, what's his name, Rob, wasn't it?
Yeah, you remember the chap? Yeah, I think you knew him.
Yeah, I knew Kavanagh. They were when I was at HP. They were really good partners.
I remember asking him once, "Who's your best mate at HP?" If you had to go to someone like for a reference or anything, and he said Martin Hess.
Did he really?
I remember he said that. I didn't even know you then.
Blimey,
He said that a long time ago.
But you must have, when you were in Kavanagh, you must have, I mean, don't want to give you current age away. You must have been in your 30s.
Yeah. It was early. Because at BSG, I was only there a couple of years.
But I suppose
before Kavanagh.
Just sort of lessons for people listening. You don't have to necessarily go straight into sales after uni. I mean, you were in your early 30s when when
exactly.
That happened.
I'd spent quite a while on the technical side, and during that time, I wasn't even. I thought I quite enjoyed that. But yeah, eventually I got there.
When you were in
to the
sales,
dark side.
so you were in the dark side. You had your target or quota. How long did it take you before you thought, "Hey, this is for me. This is the glove really fits well here"?
It was pretty immediate. Because I had such a long transition and the opportunities I had as well, and a lot of luck, to be honest, because, where I might have been sort of a lead as a consultant or a pre-sales on that side, I was working with account managers. And then, like I said, sales can be very ruthless. It can be very black and white. And if numbers aren't getting hit, people go.
Yeah, in that respect, it's a very easy role to measure success and failure, isn't it? But you joined OCSL, didn't you? And that's when I met you.
Yes.
Tim Thrower.
Yeah, that's right. That was again one of the best opportunities I've ever had. Was SCC taking over the previous place, Kavanagh, OCSL. I met or heard of through as a great HP partner through some contacts at HP, and they said, "Oh, you'd love it there. They'd really look after you," and they kind of told them about me, and we had some discussions, and I was never going to go because I was happy at Kavanagh. But after the SCC takeover, they sort of contacted me again and said, "Oh, you fancy coming now?" One of the reasons I didn't want to go is because they didn't have a city office or city presence.
Yeah.
And I know it's totally different now, but, back then, if you were working in the city, and a lot of your clients, financial services clients, amongst others, are all based around there. The city's a very small place, a square mile, that's it. Yeah. But then you have Canary Wharf and you have the West End as well.
But I think they gave you a city office, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I kind of insisted that.
Yeah, well done.
To make this work, you need to be present. You need to be able to pick the phone up and speak to clients and be able to meet them at short notice as well, rather than trying to plan them. So I was doing a lot of that, just by being present.
And then OCSL were bought by Cancom.
Yeah.
A few extra companies were bought along the way, and then Cancom were eventually bought by Telefonica Tech. And you're still there. And one of the things that's always impressed me, I mean, because I came into OCSL as chairman, had the pleasure of meeting you and then worked with you for a number of years, is the way you transitioned from not just selling product or hardware, but you've been successful selling hardware, software, projects, professional services, multi-year managed services contracts, haven't you? And I've always felt that great sellers can adapt, and you've obviously adapted, Anuj.
Thank you for that again. Yes, I don't think there's any other way apart from being able to adapt, especially in our industry. The technology moves faster in the tech industry moves faster than anything else out there. And, it should, over a long term, be something that really adds value to clients and is deflationary as well, right? So it's not just about it gets more and more expensive. Everything we do, and this is why a lot of times I think we're really, anyone in our industry is so lucky, because even during hard economic times, in what we do, there's always something you can do to replace legacy environments, because there's something newer and better and cheaper out there that can end up saving our clients money. So you've got to adapt, and you've got to go with the times. There was a time when things, most of what we were doing was on-prem. That's where the hardware and software and on-premise and data center type background comes from. But we've seen the advancement of the hyperscalers over the last 10 years now, and it is at a different level. It's almost like a default. Remember back in the day, you'll know this. Back in the day, it was like nobody gets the sack for buying IBM, and then nobody gets the sack for buying Cisco. This was all hardware type stuff. Well, nowadays, it's like, oh yeah, well, if I put it in Azure or AWS or Google,
that brings me on to another subject, actually, because you've never been with what we call a vendor, whether it be an IBM or an HP, a Microsoft, a AWS in that sense. And I've spent a lot of time in those, and I think that, a lot of people's success in those big brand companies comes down to the brand. I'd argue that the top sellers, and there are top sellers there, they make the difference at the margin, but you can't say that 100% of what they sell is down to them. I think in the world that you've sold in, I'd say most of the success is down to you as an individual, because the brand isn't as strong. All right, you align yourself to strong vendors, but I think it makes it that much harder. And I think you've always said, well, it's a bit harder, isn't it?
I definitely believe that. I definitely think, all right, I don't think it's down to myself. It's definitely the organisation and the people around you, right? That's a key factor. But one thing is for sure, you do not have a badge, right? I've got no Microsoft badge, HP badge, Pure badge, AWS, you name it. We have a name. And okay, today we're Telefonica Tech. It is something that is a bit of a game changer for us. But I've been used to companies where no one's ever heard of you. So why? And you do have to graft for that. Why, when there is hundreds of resellers and solution providers out there, why should they go with you? And I think a lot of that is down to sort of building, I've been fortunate enough, even back in my, what I call techie days, building relationships with similar, on the customer side of it, similar people who have also, grown as individuals and become, the global infrastructure managers, CIOs, COOs and CEOs as well of nowadays. So having that longevity in those relationships has really helped. But you're right. Having, you can go to a big, company like Microsoft and people will pick the phone up to you. Not so the other way around.
That leads me on to, let's talk now, Anuj. So what, put the modesty to one side. What has worked for you over the years? Tell me the sort of secret sauce that has made you successful and continually successful, because I think our listeners and viewers would want to hear that.
Yeah. It's all luck, Martin. Okay. I'm totally jammy.
I thought it was.
If we did a heads and tails right now, I bet you.
Tell me how come you're lucky year in, year out?
One of the key things is to, building trust and building a relationship with the clients that you're working with, and that doesn't happen overnight. It's right down to the little things like responding to emails, answering the phone, being available, or making time, even when you're not doing business, to see those contacts and see those clients, right? The client is one side of it. There's also the whole list of technology vendors that you need to keep relationships as well. But I think the key thing is listening to your clients, understanding their businesses, understanding their motivations, and that's both individuals within those organizations and the bigger picture for that organization as well. That's key. It's not around this technology or that technology really. It's finding what is gonna either add it to revenue generation, increase produce cost savings, or creating more efficiencies. It's key things, but listening and relationships is number one.
Just sort of picking up what you've said there, I think the most successful sellers in my experience are the hardest workers in a business. That's not to say other functions don't work very hard, but it's graft day in, day out, day in, day out. Some might get lucky. A deal might land on their lap and they look good for a quarter or a year. But if you're gonna be top dog or top gun year in, year out, you have to graft, don't you? Every day. You have to keep that mojo going. And what you say also about listening, I think it's so important when you talk to people who don't know, who aren't sellers, but look into selling as a profession. They tend to think it's all about what I call advocacy, talking, basically selling what you've got in your kit bag. But actually, it's all about questioning and listening and questioning and listening, active listening, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what you say, I think, is, there's those two areas, hard graft and questioning and listening, are so important.
I've come across some of the best orators and presenters you can imagine, but the problem is they just want to tell you everything. It's like, blah,
that's not selling.
This is what we do.
People think that's selling. It's not
you won't
selling.
give people a chance to talk and tell you what they actually want. I think there's another thing, Martin. I don't think selling isn't selling anymore in this day and age. It's every client you're going to go and see, they already know what they want. They have the internet. They have ChatGPT. They have every source of information you can imagine.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So when you're there, when you don't have to tell them about all of that because most of the time they know everything.
It's very, very true, Anuj. I think when I started off, I knew more about IT than my customers.
Yes.
I'd call it asymmetric information. Now it's the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
So how is that selling? It's not selling. Selling is really about listening and finding a way to make it easy for clients to be able to consume what they already know they want.
You make it easy for them to buy, don't you?
Or
make it easy
or
to
an
buy.
easier way, or actually you didn't know this. This is what so-and-so customer done, or give references, give examples. It's really about that. It's not about, gift of the gab, as so many people say, and all the lingo and how well you present.
That.
No,
Absolutely
not
not.
at all.
I agree. One of the other things I've noticed about you over the years is you play the long game. So you'll follow a client, because I'm sure you agree, people buy from people in business to business selling. A client leaves, moves on to another job. You'll follow them. You'll just keep that relationship going, won't you? Even if there isn't an immediate opportunity.
I think there's two things here. One is absolutely, having that. If you have a good relationship, you've been reliable and you've delivered. If a client moves from one place to another, that's definitely, everybody knows this. That's going to be, they'll reach out to you if there's a way of being able to get involved there. But then also another thing is, it's not just about one big deal, very small transactions. It's more about having those transactions constantly going on. We call it run rate business sometimes, but it's so important. Don't take it for granted, because unless you're having those transactions and delivering on each little one, you're not building that trust up for when the bigger stuff, or to be even considered for something bigger. That's the long game. The other long game, we talk about salespeople having great quarters or great years. And I think I remember once we had a chat, and I told you about a book I was reading, which is Mike Tyson's Undisputed Truth.
Right.
And it's resonated with me, and I think it's stuck in my brain for so many years that he was at a party in Vegas and he saw Frank Sinatra. It's like, wow, man, there's Frank Sinatra. And at the time, Mike Tyson was indestructible. He was a champion of the world, and he was.
People lost the fight before they got in the ring because he just instilled fear in them, didn't he?
It was just, I've never seen, I'm a big fan, never seen anything like it at that time. We saw what happened afterwards. And but what Frank Sinatra said to him, and he wrote this in his book, is he whispered in his ear, he said, "Hey, champ," he said, "it's not how good you're doing now, it's how long you do good." And if you look at, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's amazing. If you look at Frank Sinatra over his whole career, he was a legend up until the day he died, right? It was amazing. And, unfortunately for Tyson, that didn't carry on. He did go downhill, probably because of the bad influence he had around him. But, for me, it's always been, don't have one good year. Keep doing it.
Do you know the best way I used to motivate you, Anuj, is because I knew you were.
You used to wind me up.
You're a Roger Federer or a Novak
no.
Djokovic. Or Phil the Power Taylor. You wanted to win it every year, and we used to have the Seller of the Year awards, didn't we, at kickoff? And that was the prize you always wanted. So I always sort of said halfway through the year how well one or two others were doing and how you might not be getting the prize this year because so
you guys
snapping at your ankle. Gee, did that fire you up? So that's a big motivator. So let's go on to motivation, Nancy. What you've done very well career-wise, financially. You've got huge respect amongst your peers for what you do. What does keep driving you? What keeps motivating you?
I didn't always want the award, by the way. I just wanted to do well. I always want to just do as much as I possibly can. And you have to have the opportunities there, right? And I know at some point there might not be, there's going to be a bad year at some point, and you are going to get beaten at some point. So it's not about that. But I think generally
at some point, at some point, all right. I'm not so sure. Anyway,
I think it's inside. I think it's something inside you. You have individuals I'm just really. I feel like
you must love it. You must love it.
100%. That's a key thing. Is loving what you do. That is probably if anyone out there if you can find something you love and you really enjoy. I love the challenge. The challenge from clients who are trying to achieve something or meet something or have doubt sometimes that your organization can deliver. I love that. That is, and can't get enough of it. Just got to keep, and it's not, again, if you win a solution, an opportunity, you can't just sit around after that. I don't know. It's just like,
but there must be
next?
A bit of motivation from you thinking, I do want to be that top guy. I do want to.
I think deep down inside, everybody would love that. But again, you've got to enjoy it. Yeah. The minute if I really fall out of love with it or I don't enjoy what I'm doing anymore, and it gets hard. It gets hard at times. None of this it's not easy. It isn't.
So let's maybe look at just a few tips, a bit of advice for others. So when you get a big organization and you want to sort of break into it, tell me the sort of things you do. You spend a lot of time researching the individual, don't you? Finding out, when we talk about opportunities, working out what makes people tick.
You need to understand who, we quite often, and I was to blame in this, when you get a meeting with someone or an organization, or maybe one of our sort of ISRs, or creates a lead, or you get one from a vendor. We too often just rush to a meeting, and we want to tell them, we're so excited about telling them what my company, this is what we can do, these are our specialist areas. And over time, I think one of the things I've learned is, number one, what does that company do? try and find out and really look into what that company does. How does it make money? How successful? How well are they doing? Look at their company report. But then also, equally, what you said about individuals that you're going to meet, try and get an understanding of, what is their role within the organization? What is the, what if you can find out what their motivation is and things like that. That comes later,
And it's easier for us these days with LinkedIn, isn't it? I mean, people reveal a lot more than they used to 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and this happened. I don't think this is rocket science to anyone. Everyone looks at LinkedIn. Everyone looks at, one of the good things is, who's the mutual friends straight away? Oh, he knows that person. Well, I don't think everybody does do that.
I think it's so obvious, but you work that really, really well, don't you?
Yeah, look, an example where, there's a customer. People are finding it, the general thing you hear is it's really hard to get through to that person.
Yeah.
That individual doesn't meet anyone, doesn't want to talk to anyone. But you can do a bit of research. Through that research, I found out, there was some of the vendors they deal with. The MD of one vendor was an exec sponsor in there. The MD of another vendor was an exec sponsor and actually had a good relationship.
And you had a very good relationship with that particular
MD, fortunately, yes. And this is what I talk when I say about mutual friends, looking at simple things like LinkedIn. But it was just going and understanding and really just finding out, because clearly there's relationships there already. And I think the best thing you can do is get a warm reference into an individual, if it's possible. The person you're going to meet, just to say from another trustworthy source to say, actually, I know Anuj, I know his company, we've done XYZ with them, or they're a really important partner to us. Think
so you get it's
worth you.
But
you have to. It's not just a matter of just going in and meeting someone or picking the phone up, right? You have to do that. I think.
So I think great sellers are incredibly nosy. They're incredibly inquisitive, aren't they, in a nice way? And they network.
Network's important.
The other thing I think is, is leveraging your own company and, really leveraging the resources of the company to the benefit of your opportunity or your client. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Look, it's all great in terms of what we're talking about, in terms of what we do externally with clients. But one of the biggest challenges, and I've seen this go two ways with really successful account managers, that you get the ones who are absolutely want to bulldoze internally, do what I say, get this done, otherwise you're out of here. They'll complain, they'll scream and shout. They're the bulldozers, right? I think it's equally important to navigate your organization internally and really those relationships internally with all the different divisions, whether it's someone in the warehouse who needs to arrange the delivery, or if it's someone who looks after the operations of a managed service, and that whole team, you need to have relationships there, because you never know when.
And I think you're very, very, very good at that.
It's so important, Martin. It's so important to have that.
But then you get people wanting to work with you on your opportunities, your clients, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's over time, and they know you can sort of how to get not just get things approved. It's working as a team, because they know we're going to all work hard here as a team, and we're going to have fun doing it, right?
Yeah.
You've got to enjoy it.
So we're moving towards the end of our chat. One of the interesting career moves you sort of made and then came back again. I remember you moved into sales management a few years ago. And a lot of people think that's the obvious progression from selling, is you want to get into management.
Yeah.
You went into it, and I can't remember how long it lasted. I don't think it was much more than 6 months. But I remember you said to me, Martin, this isn't for me.
Yeah. So it was. it was a sales. Look, when I did
was
the
that then? Was that?
Well, that whole sales director role. You're right. This is you. Even I thought that's the natural progression. This is what you got to aspire to, right? You become the sales leader, and then you're the sales director and VP of sales. And from my own experience, it's absolutely the right thing to do for some people, but for others, it is just.
And what didn't you like about it, and what did you miss?
Everything we've talked about today, in terms of looking after clients, having those relationships and networks, that's what I really love. But a lot of that in a managerial or a sales director role, right, which is what I had to do for about 12 months nearly.
Was it 12 months?
It was 2017 to 2018 when we sold.
Yeah.
And that's when I come and spoke to you and said, Marty, get me out of this, man. I said I'll do it until we sell the company.
The other thing I said to you was, if you're doing it just to have influence, then you can have more influence as the top seller in an organization, because that is, because of the respect that comes with that, and people basically want to listen to your opinion. I think that's been borne out, hasn't it?
I think, yeah, I would say that. Look, again, it's being one of the successful, you're transacting, you're bringing business in, you're winning deals for the company, in terms of what we want to do. And yes, you do have a voice. But then again, Martin, that might be because of the organization I work for, because of the team, the senior management team there, because of the board there, who, yes, again, relationships.
But you've earned the right for that, I think.
Yeah, they have faith in you.
Right.
Well, if anyone, I think anybody out there who can consistently deliver, you should get a good reputation, and because hopefully a little bit about what you're doing.
And you've had some great proteges. You've also, even though you haven't been in sales management, strictly speaking, for long, you've basically worked with junior sellers and brought them along. I know you've had some fantastic, great proteges who've gone on to some really big careers. Yeah,
there's been some great stuff, and I think I prefer that whole taking people under your wing rather than that official management, or I'm the sales director. It's more working with your peers, with your colleagues, especially the younger ones, in terms of putting your arm around them and getting them involved. I really enjoy that. Absolutely. I think the longer I've been doing this, that has become something I really enjoy doing, in terms of mentoring, or people come to you and ask, how did you do that, or how did
and
I'm
you're
very
very generous with
what would you do?
You're generous with your time for
I think
them
it's really important. I think it's really important to do that.
So we better bring this to a close. We could keep talking for ages. This is so.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And likewise. But I tell you, the other thing, Anuj, is, and I do think this is why you can be successful year in, year out, is your positive outlook. And you talk about the changes in the industry. Some people see that as a threat. You see that as an opportunity, because it throws up new opportunities. And whenever I talk to you, and we still keep in touch, even though we don't work together anymore, you're always positive. Yeah, there's always a world of opportunity with you, isn't it? It's always, you never say to me, "Oh, it's, I'm really down. There's nothing going on out there. I can't see any business opportunities." It's always the opposite. It's always a world of opportunity, and that's that's infectious, by the way.
Thank you. Look, I'm definitely, the glass is definitely half full with me always. You've got to be optimistic, right? It's got a lot to do with your mindset, and especially in what we do. Change is inevitable, is happening all the time. Like I said, at a much faster rate in our industry. So you've got to embrace it, right? And it is opportunity. It is what's next. It's really exciting times right now, both in our organization as well. We've come out the other side, following acquisition after acquisition. I think we're at the cusp of a wave now where things are really, we've got a good, strong way forward. And as long as you believe in what you're doing and what your organisation is doing. It's nothing but positivity.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Anything you want to say that we haven't covered before we close the show, as they say?
Only thank you for inviting me on this opportunity. I'm really honoured and flattered, and it's been great working with you over the years as well.
No, none of that. None of that. No, thank you, Anuj, for your time.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Hope everybody else has enjoyed it too.